So my guest today is Ed Hawkeswood, um, professor at Fanshawe College. My professor a couple of years ago taught an industrial communications course, things like how to write an email, how to write, um, I guess, technical writing, cover letter, and give presentations. So yeah, it's good to catch up again after 3 years almost. But you're a very interesting man aside from professoring. You work in broadcast media, and I learned today that you did a few episodes of your own couple of podcasts, kids podcasts. So I'm excited to get into all those things.
Good. It's great to be on the show. Thank you for asking me. You were a fantastic student. I still remember you would sit front row, a little bit to the left. You had good peers with you in your groups, and without going into anything too detailed, you were one of the better students and did very well in the class. So it is a pleasure to be reuniting. Yes, it has been too long after these many years, but thank you for having me on.
Oh yeah, yeah, no problem. So yeah, as far as the professor side of things, you have a background in English, English and literature. So I'm curious, like, how did you get into that? Did you just love reading as a kid? Did you like teaching people? Like, how did you kind of get into that interest?
I think that at the end of high school, I saw myself potentially being a sports writer, and um, I started first year at Queen's taking health and physical education and arts. So I was going to do a dual degree, and I moved away from the health and phys ed after a while, but kept the English, and it became my major. And I took a terrific number of diverse courses at Queen's University, and my thinking was that even if I don't become a sports writer or a published author, at least I'll have a skill set that is transferable across many fields in conjunction with getting, a humanities and arts education, which I think is really, really important because, you get a degree in history, you get a degree in sociology, but when you're getting one in English, I feel like artists and authors from different eras, oftentimes what authors and artists are saying isn't always exclusively the truth, but it's a perspective and reflective of the times. So you hear about the Romantic era, learn it was a short era, a snippet about what was believed and perceived at that time, and I'm glad I did it.
Mm. Yeah, that's pretty interesting because yeah, like perspective is important. I feel like there's a lot of focus on objectivity with like science and technology. People are always asking questions like, "Hey, how do you know? Why is this food good for me? Is it backed up by evidence, etc." So that's not a great example, but basically what I'm trying to get at is I personally have not, um, was not, or have not been too interested in like the humanities and art side when I was a kid. But now that I'm getting older and I have a lot of experience in the technical field, now it's like now I'm learning, especially at the workplace, like the way you interact with people and how you explain problems and ask questions at the right times, like that really helps you kind of move forward. So from that perspective, I guess perspective is important. Um, and along with that, I'm trying to get more into writing, and I had this author on a previous episode, and I said on camera, okay, I guess I'm writing a book, so I have to work on that and practice my writing. So pretty cool. I have an appreciation for English and literature. So yeah, that's awesome. That's cool to hear.
Well, keep writing. Shakespeare didn't wake up, roll out of bed, and sneeze into a napkin. Hamlet. It was based on Hamlet, a Danish production. It needed work and reworking, and so all good writing, as I said to our class, is good rewriting. So never feel that because you have to work on it or work at it or work with it that you're doing something wrong. In fact, you're actually doing it correctly. That's part of the process. So stick at it, and if you ever need something proofread, just let me know, and all I'll take is 5% of the book's profits. Okay, sounds good. Deal.
I see you're also a practice negotiator.
As my English 265 prof Edward Lobb once said, he said, "Every author writes with a paycheck in mind." So don't think
Oh,
I'm in the
okay.
greatest authors. There's one author who responded to a student's plea for help with writing and said, "Just write, 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 write as if no one's going to read it. Write a poem, rip it up into shreds, and throw it out. Just write for the love of writing." Because much like being pregnant, eventually something good will burst forth. So keep it up.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. That's great advice. That's basically my plan. Yeah, I would like to write a book. Could be years down the road, but you can't get there unless you're doing it day in and day out. For now, my goal is like, all right, let me sit down once a week for an hour, start writing, and hopefully,
Good.
the dominoes roll, and then that becomes 2 or 3 days a week, et cetera, and so on. So that's cool.
Toughest the toughest thing to write is dialogue, so don't feel hung up if you're stuck on dialogue because you have to get
Hmm.
in to the character's mind. You have to drive the narrative, but then you have to say it through the eyes of the character. And we are what we are. Our genetics are our genetics, but we don't live in exclusively a world with just ourselves. We're populated with older, younger, different genders, different nationalities, different perspectives, different accents, all these differences. So to be able to be able to produce dialogue from all these different perspectives really means putting on others' hats or walking miles in their shoes, and then producing meaningful conversation pieces that move your story from where it is to where you, the writer, need it to be. So if you get stuck on dialogue, you are not alone.
Hmm. So, what's your suggestion for more like nonfiction writing? Because my idea for the book was to have it be kind of a collection of essays or diary entries, just like keep writing over the months and years. And then if there's something interesting, maybe make that a bigger piece or, something like that. So, um, as far as writing from someone else's perspective or in their shoes, like, is there a good way to weave in dialogue when like if it's nonfiction, but you want dialogue to make a point, but you're not 100% sure that it's an accurate dialogue? Is that a problem? That's a question I've had for a long time.
That's a good point. I'll touch on a few things you mentioned. One, uh, dialogues, or sorry, diaries, journal entries. People seem to think we no longer have books that we write diary entries anymore, but the actuality is we do. We just do it in different forms. It's often taking the form of social media rather than some clandestine uh, pen to paper book we hide under the bed type entry, and it is there for all to see. Now, when you say dialogue difficult, you can if it just pops in your head, that's still words produced by you. It may not be spoken, but those count additionally. So you can jot those down. You could also, if you're stuck, just put down, "I would like to say something that describes how awkward the feeling was," or describes how the situation is. And even if you don't have the exact wording, you're getting a sense of whatever the moment is. So, one, keep writing an hour a day. If it's half hour on a book, half hour on a journal entry, split it up and produce it that way. And even if things pop into your head later, we have note taking ability on our phones. We have voice recordings we can do. There are apps that will take voice to text. So if in that 30 or 60-minute time frame you don't have the exact wording, as I said before, all good writing is rewriting. You can have it come back later at another point. Like one of the most popular books or book series of the last 20x years is Harry Potter, and the subplot is the growth of one character, Neville Longbottom. And in the first book, at the very end, he stands up to what he perceives to be wrong, but he gets outdueled. He doesn't have the right words. He has the right conviction. But then over the course of 7 books, he is, without giving any spoiler away, central to the overall overarching uh, uh, you know, plot that's being driven. He has a key role in the battle, and he uses the same conviction. He is standing up to evil, but now he is able to use the right words, right actions. I'm not going to give anything away. And so, if you are struggling early on, there may be down the road victory for you, the author writer, if you find those words, and we, the reader, travel with you on the journey to that point.
Okay. Yeah. I will definitely keep that in mind because yeah, that's a good point. If you're not sure what to write, then describe what you want to say, and then writing is not a uh it's not like a straight line. You got to come back and revisit what you write anyway. So that would be a good thing to come back to. So we've been talking a lot about writing and how to write, and you have experience in broadcast media involving like on-air advertisements. Um, I mean, I don't know too much about it, so my understanding is that role is like, say I'm watching a Raptors game and uh, Jack and Leo or Devin or whoever is the announcer at the time, they read ads usually during free throws. Um, I'm assuming like you're involved in the background to get all that set up. Is that accurate?
Yes, just to be specific, I work the Raptors games, but not for the Canadian broadcasters. Oftentimes, I'll work for the visiting broadcasters. But what you're trying to get at is the importance of reading critically and having an observing eye, and how what it is that I studied in school can have a role in a workaday world. And it's true. It's so important to just read things over sometimes. I know that people get offered updates on their iPhone. They just accept. They get offered, they get notices from banks or whatever it may be, and you click accept. But if you read things over time and time again, it stands to reason that with a little bit of thinking, a little bit of logic, you can deduce the information that you need to to really do your job or make the right and informed decisions. So when people are watching live broadcasts, when they are watching television shows, movies, whatever it may be, at some point, somebody read something. They don't just talk basketball. There are there are sponsors that want their brand marketed properly. So the right wording of the right advertisements has to be read on air. It has to be read over a couple times to be free of error, to be correct wording. So you double check those things. And then you're also reading scripts because you need to know when things are going to happen. So for instance, if there's a sport and there's a fast break, there's a chance that a fast food company could sponsor what's called the fast break of the game. And you have to be observant enough to know that, oh, there is a sponsor. It ties into this section of the game. When the opportunity arises, be ready for that promo to be read, or ad to be read, or copy to be read. And when you're a professor, when you're a teacher, you go into the classroom, and it isn't just a matter of teaching long division or how to write a report properly. You have to also anticipate what questions are coming, and so you need to have read over what your assignment is that you've given the students, and anticipate what sort of problems or angles they see things at. And I'm not saying read their minds, but anticipating, because of shared reading experience, comes into play.
Yeah, it's it's a fine dance of timing, preparation, uh, you know, scripting, like your all these points you're making, which I have not thought too deeply about at all, because everything just, for the most part, things go pretty smoothly. So you only really notice if something went wrong, just as a viewer. But like the effort it takes to, for example, if we just focus on writing an ad read, let's say, um, like it would be, because if you're the writer, you have to consider who is the one reading it as well. Because you can write generally, but if you write, for example, in a very technical way, but the reader's someone very excited, animated, it's just not going to work. It'll take like too long to say words, if it has too many syllables, etc. So it's really cool to think about like all the effort it would take to kind of get that operation to go smoothly. Um, yeah, it's pretty interesting. I guess I'll just do a hard turn into the next topic. Um,
Sure.
your so what got you interested in starting podcasting way back when?
At the start of the all the lockdowns, I had more time. I had a few things that came together. A bit more time, and interest in a creative outlet. I think a lot of people felt uh, handcuffed by the inability to do things that we could have been doing or should have been doing. And I had some experience going through things with my kids, and I just thought, I have some ability, some brains, some time, some desire. If I start to share with other listeners and viewers some ideas on kids' sports and kids' arts, then maybe they can avoid some of the mistakes I made, or learn from my errors, or spend their money as wisely as possible, because we know how important dollars and cents are, especially with costs being what they are today. So I started doing it. I enjoy it. I have, I'll be honest, I have not done it much lately, but it's something I should get back into, because most importantly, a friend of mine told me that when you're parenting, if your children see you do something you're passionate about, it helps them in their future endeavors, because they'll be able to see a difference between when you're going through the motions doing something and when you're really passionate about it. And then the good differentiation he made was that he cuts his lawn because you just have to cut the lawn. Turn on the mower, up and down a few rows, you're on autopilot there. But in keeping with the theme of outdoors and yard, he's very passionate about his uh, food, cooking, the vegetables that he grows. And so he and his daughters have a hand in planting vegetables, uh, watering, nurturing, taking care of vegetables throughout the course of the summer, and harvesting them. It's a reminder that I should get back at it for a number of reasons. One, I like doing it. Two, I can do it. And three, it could save people time and money, because there are some There's some great coaches, some great artistic pursuits out there, great sports, all of these good things. And then there's some other things that parents should be aware of and watch out for.
So to add a little context, I believe you are involved in coaching for kids sports. Is that right?
Yeah, I've coached basketball, baseball, and soccer for kids. Uh, my kids have also tried artistic pursuits such as which dances have my children tried? Hip hop, ballet, a little bit of theater, very very little theater, but they also have tried a couple different instruments. So there are musical inclinations, and when I say theater, also I did a little bit of improv when I first moved to another city, a second city, and I know the value and beauty and thrill of it. And I have relatives involved and friends, I should also say, involved in theater and arts, television arts. So, parents, they have big, expensive dreams when it comes to their kid and
It's so important to do something you love. Sets a great example for whoever's watching, especially kids when you're a parent. I don't speak from personal experience, but just seems seems pretty straightforward. I do agree. Improv is great. When I was working near Ottawa, I took two improv classes, and the yes and is the first thing they teach you. It's such a simple idea, and it's just like so cool to see it in practice because it gives you an excuse just to be silly. You don't have to plan what you're going to do next. Day to day, you might be worried about like, oh, I don't want to offend anybody. I want to make sure I'm doing my job right. I want to do whatever. But in an improv space, it's like, hey man, just let's just we're in this together. Let's have fun. Um, and speaking of podcasts specifically, I also started during the pandemic, and what got me going is I would watch a lot of podcasts. I thought I would want to do one, and then a friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you just use the software? You can record it for free." And then, the cost of entry is $0 at that time, so we got that going. But like you, kind of as the pandemic became less, um, I don't know what the word is. Like as the time kind of passed on, you kind of get busy with other things, and you want to do it, but then you don't do it. So I've kind of maintained at least one episode a month if I can. And it started as just talking to friends. Then people get busy, you can't get people. So then I started doing like book reviews, whatever. So it's honestly I love it because it's a very open-ended um kind of medium, I guess. Because it's
yep.
talking, you can talk about whatever you want. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to get back into it whenever you can find the time. It's amazing, and at this point, like literally, some episodes nobody's listening, but I could just keep doing it week after week.
Good for you. Good for you. Good for you. You should. You're an educated fella. You have a good voice, and you know, again, we've seen things because of unfortunately businesses going by the wayside or kids dropping out of sports or being involved in things that they should be involved in. When you bring up things like book reviews or theater involvement, these are important things. The arts are really, really important. They enrich, they inspire, they cultivate, and we should never squash that voice or that source because you never know when a book that you pass along will turn into something bigger for somebody. Somebody said once, something bigger for somebody lesser. Now, I don't regard any human being as less than any others. All human life equal. There's value to it, but the point I'm trying to make is the impact or the ripple effect of some small gesture, such as an artist's music or a painter's style and stroke, can go on to much bigger and better things. And we never know how positive that path can be.
I'm curious about your perspective on like TV and films. So specifically, let's say you read a book. It's a novel, whether it's a teen novel or adult novel. 3 to 500 pages is like a medium to long book. The literal time commitment to read through that whole piece of work is hours. Even if you're a fast reader, I presume you wouldn't be able to finish the whole thing within the time duration of watching like an hour and a half movie. So, as far as like the imprint it has on your kind of experience of life, I guess, or memory of the story, you're constantly reflecting on characters. If you're reading it over a period of few months, like you're revisiting characters after a week off or something like that. So in hindsight, after you finish reading that, it feels like, for me personally, it feels like closer in a way. Whereas if I'm watching a movie or a TV series, um, so for example, a great series was the newest Stranger Things season from a few months ago. It's excellent. I love watching it, but it's like I know that during the experience it was amazing. I love watching it and I would love to watch it again. But if you ask me what happened, I'd have to like think about it and try to figure out what happened. So what I'm trying to get at is like TV and film is popular. It's the new popular media, but the turnover rate of content is so quick. Like I will literally watch a movie every day. I'll forget what I watched 3 days ago. So I don't know. Any thoughts on like how that might impact even kids or growing up in any way?
Yeah, you bring up something good, something important. Uh, Binge watching, it had a place, and it still does. It obviously peaked during recent years because of recent circumstances that I don't even enjoy bringing up. But you don't get to digest the nuggets. And what I mean by that is you'll see a film come out, and afterwards there'll be articles, sites, YouTubers that will say 10 Easter eggs you missed, or maybe you didn't catch this while watching this show. And it's unfortunate. Now you may miss things the first time around watching a movie, and when you go back, you may catch them. But if you fly through things of the whole experience. Now, one rule of thumb is for me is every year when I watch National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, I try and really look for something new that I didn't see the last time or before. Like I'm at the point where, when Clark Griswold's in the department store, I'm looking at the extras or what other things they're selling besides, uh, the certain the women's underwear counter. It's gotten to that point. It's such a good movie. I could watch it a million times. But what I'm trying to say is, if the book that you're reading is pretty mainstream, and there are books that are written to just sell. I don't think John Grisham would be offended if I said, John Grisham knows his audience, knows his style, he knows his targets. It's important he hits that. Sometimes he veers a little bit, but he usually comes back because it sells, makes money. When those get turned into movies, and not many of his books are getting turned into them any longer, in those instances, a cookie cutter director should be used because that director isn't going to take chances. They'll do the close up of the star, they'll do the close up of the hero, they'll portray the antagonist in a negative way. And that's what audiences want, that's what audiences expect, and that's what the book necessitates. But if you get an earth shattering book or an earth shattering director then as the viewer, you really should open your mind up to the director's way of perceiving that story, and just enjoying the ride. Like if you think of Stanley Kubrick and how Stanley Kubrick told the story of Lolita, it's very different from the book, but it's a very good directorial effort. It may disappoint some people because that's not in the book. That's not what they're expecting. But what audiences can never forget is how Akshay enjoys a book is different than how Eddie enjoys a book, is different how a reader in Australia enjoys a book, or a classroom in Nicaragua enjoys a story. So right off the bat, everything is perceived uniquely. And as such, when you have a non John Grisham, aka middle of the road story, just enjoy the road that the director takes you on. For instance, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how I categorize the war film 1917, because what the director did was such an amazing achievement in direction that I was astounded by it. And I have to now go back and think about the story, and if I really enjoyed the story, how it worked as a war film, where it fits in the entire these the war films I think are the best of all time, and certainly 1917 is way up there. It's breathtaking and astounding, but that's because the director was allowed to take audiences on such a ride. So uh, there is a place and time for the mainstream experience, but I also think we can never squash the vision of a director or a producer who can take a story that they've purchased and secured the rights to and transform it into something unique and magical.
Yeah, like creating a film is in itself a retelling of a source material if there is a book. Um, you can do it poorly or you can do it well. Even if you do it well, someone's not going to like it because it's not exactly the same as the book. Um, yeah, no, I guess that's up to the audience. But yeah, I would agree. I If something's different, I appreciate it. Specifically, recently, I love reading the Terminal List book series by Jack Carr. It's about a American former Navy SEAL. There was a show about it released on Canada Day, actually, um, or maybe a day before, with Chris Pratt as the star. Like the basic skeleton of the story is there, but they change a couple of things, and I think it turned out pretty well. It was pretty awesome. So I would hope people enjoy it, but I guess if you don't like it, you don't like it. That's fine. But in any case,
You know, some people are wondering before you wrap it up, and I'll explain this from my
yeah,
my experience. Usually, a director gets, as I like to call it, one shot per production. And I mean, you have to tell a story a certain way. Like people have to be allowed to speak, or action needs to take place and move. And a director in a mainstream production usually gets one really unique shot. It could be, what was it? Okay, you're not going to believe this. You're going to say, are you serious? But Hubie Halloween is an Adam Sandler movie from a few years ago. Like the beats when most Adam Sandler movies are made. He's got his cast, he's got his gags, he's got his pacing, his characters, all the his accents, all these sorts of things. But he's making this film, and there's something going on with uh, the mother, the elderly mother in it, and it reminded me at the time of the Alfred Hitchcock movie Psycho, and I just sort of squirreled that away. And at the very end of Hubie Halloween, there's an overhead shot of staircases and a person running out them. And it's not the exact same as Hitchcock's, but Hitchcock has a cool overhead shot in Psycho of the staircase. And on a linear level, it looks like somebody's going back and forth, but because it's stairs, we know that there's this up and down motion. So that director for Hubie Halloween, even though it's not any sort of directorial um, work of art, it's well directed, it's fine. Uh, the director got one shot where they could put their own stamp on what is clearly an Adam Sandler movie. And so when you see Quentin Tarantino, when you see other amazing directors, and there are great American directors, Canadian directors like Adam McGoyan, female directors, uh, directors that you're going to see a massive influence from Bollywood coming up, and they will look to put their own voice or perspective or stamp on something. And that's when audiences can see that a director has gone from shot, camera, tripod, coverage, close ups to something really unique and astounding that uses resources in a fashion that's attributed to that director's voice.
Awesome, Eddie. Thank you so much for the time. I'd love to do it again,
Oh, you're
possibly in
welcome. Is there
person.
anything else you want? Yeah, anything else to ask me about?
So Zoom's gonna kick me out in like 40 seconds. So
Okay.
I would
If
love to.
you ever need anything else, you want to do a follow up. If I do something earth shattering or astounding, then feel free to look me up. And in the meantime, take care. Have a great autumn, and thanks for having me on.
All the best, man. All the best.